Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something huge, really universal, navigating life's big stages, youth, maturity, and then age. And not just getting through them, but living them worthily.
Yeah, and our guide for this is, well, it's a classic text from 1917, Rabbi Stephen S. Wise's How to Face Life. It's short, but incredibly potent. He wrote it when everyone was obsessed with external stuff, militarism, war preparation.
Right, and that context is super important. He draws this line in the sand immediately. The world's focused on war preparedness, but Wise is saying, hang on. The real preparation we need is self-preparedness, for the soul, the inner life.
Exactly. It's a powerful framing. He basically asks, look, if preparing for destruction needs all this planning, shouldn't a constructive life need even more careful thought? And crucially, that means inner work. He actually argues the military way is easier because it demands less real reasoning.
Interesting. Minimal reasoning for that kind of external prep.
Yeah, whereas preparing for a meaningful life, that requires, as he puts it, the largest measure of conscious moral purposing.
Okay, so this deep dive is all about Wise's three-part philosophy. What foundation do we need to build in youth to actually find fulfillment later on, in maturity and age? Let's get into it. Part 1, youth preparing for the inner life.
So he starts with this interesting paradox about planning. He brings up the idea of sketching out a map of life for young people.
A map of life? Sounds helpful.
Well, that's the thing. He immediately critiques it. Why? Because maps are for places we already know, right? Explored territory.
Okay.
But life, Wise says, if it's really going to be life, well, it can't be all foreknown and charted out like that. It's supposed to be a great adventure into the unknown, not just following directions. A map feels too rigid.
And he has that brilliant little story to back this up, doesn't he? About the parents planning schools before the baby was even born.
Oh, yes. It's such a perfect illustration of overmapping, applying to two different prep schools, one for a boy, one for a girl before conception. Talk about planning ahead.
That's wow. Taking it to the extreme.
Totally. And it's his warning shot, really. You can prepare someone so much, so definitively, that you actually rob them of the vital stuff. The chance to choose, to will, to venture out, even to mess up and learn from it. You can't map life so tightly that you kill the peril of adventure, the joy of combat, that freedom to just dare.
So no map. Instead, youth should be about pioneering. Is that the word he uses?
Exactly. Pioneering, not just making one's way. That sounds a bit passive, doesn't it? It's about breaking away, clearing a path of life for oneself. He talks about the glory of moral and intellectual pioneering, hearing God's whisper, which sounds like finding your own deep inner calling.
And that means you can't just follow the crowd.
Absolutely not. He really urges young people to, well, despise the advice of the overwise who tell them to stick to the beaten path, not to wander where others haven't. That fear of being different, of not being like everybody else, he sees that as a huge barrier.
Okay, so how does this translate into action? Is there a key takeaway here?
There is a really powerful one. It's often attributed to others, but Wise gives this command: always do what you are afraid to do.
Always do what you are afraid to do? That's strong.
It is. And he links it to General Armstrong, the founder of Hampton Institute, who apparently said, doing what can't be done is the glory of living. This isn't just physical courage. It's about tackling the fear of standing out intellectually or morally, conquering that internal resistance.
But this pioneering thing, it needs a certain restlessness, right? A discontent.
Yes, a noble discontent. Wise says we shouldn't worry about young people who seem restless as long as that dissatisfaction is noble.
Yeah.
He references Mill, better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a pig satisfied.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
A crucial one. The dissatisfaction has to be with yourself, primarily, not just reeling against the world. Because if that noble restlessness gets shut down or isn't channeled, people find poor, mean, low substitutes for real adventure.
What kind of substitutes was he talking about back then?
In 1917, he mentioned things like the low gang or the craze for the motion picture, seeing them as cheap thrills replacing deeper connections and true challenges.
And today? Well, you could easily plug in doom scrolling, endless social media, maybe empty online arguments, things that feel like engagement but lack real substance.
Precisely. They're substitutes for the hard work of genuine, selfless action. And Wise's solution: channel that energy. Give yourself completely to something bigger than yourself. Enroll under the banner of a high cause, he says. Not because you're scared, but because something truly noble has entered your life and pushes out the small, mean stuff.
Okay, now there's this pair of terms he uses that needs unpacking. Heterocentric versus egocentric for youth. What's the difference in simple terms?
Right. So egocentric is pretty straightforward. It's all about me, my success, my advantage, what I get out of it. But Wise argues youth should be heterocentric. That means centered on others, focused on duty, obligation, your contribution to the community. The way you pursue things matters more than the specific goal itself.
Way is more important than the goal. That leads straight into that really tough moral challenge he lays down, right? The idea of the wallow through the mire to the sky.
Oh, yes. This is a critical point. It's about the person who justifies doing something. Well, shady or compromised now. Maybe cutting ethical corners in business, staying silent on injustice, thinking, okay, once I get power or security, then I'll be brave, then I'll do the right thing.
A temporary lowering of standards for a future good.
Exactly. And Wise is absolutely unsparing here, he says. It's impossible. That lower standard you adopt, it takes root. It becomes your habit. It gains mastery over your soul. You can't just switch back to being noble later, the quiet evasiveness you practiced early on. That becomes who you are. There aren't two separate standards in your spirit.
Wow. So no moral shortcuts allowed. That's a heavy warning.
It really is, and he connects this directly to the future. If youth doesn't prepare for anything else, they're preparing for parenthood, for being trustees of the morrow. If they lack that pioneering spirit, that inner voice, the next generation gets a little sold and mean-hearted world.
That's quite the responsibility.
It is. And he sums up the call for youth with that beautiful line. Climb high, climb far, your goal the sky, your aim the star.
Okay. Powerful stuff for youth. Let's shift gears now to part 2, maturity. Wise calls this the body and substance of life, the main stretch of the journey, right?
Exactly. It's not just the bit between youth and age. It's significant in its own right. Like if life's a bridge, youth and age are the piers, but maturity, that's the long span you travel over. It's the powerhouse.
And the quality of that journey, that maturity, it hinges completely on how youth was lived.
Entirely. Wise is blunt. If youth was wasted, maturity becomes hard and bitter. He sees that middle-age emptiness often comes when people realize they lack the capacity to achieve or serve meaningfully because they never built the right foundation, the right standards earlier on.
But if youth was lived well, what's the payoff in maturity?
He talks about 2 sovereign powers that come with maturity. First, the capacity to achieve, having that full intellectual strength and a solid moral will. And second, the capacity to serve, that ability to enlist yourself in causes beyond your own personal gain. Selfless service.
Now, Wise mentions the temptation of middle age being disenchantment. But thinking about today, a century later, is it always disenchantment, or are people just overwhelmed, burnt out? Maybe not disillusioned because their plans failed, but just exhausted.
That's a fair question, but I think Wise's point is maybe a bit deeper than just burnout. He suggests this disenchantment is often actually an absence of enchantments, meaning people look back and mistake their poor plans and plottings, their puny purposes, for grand ideals they supposedly lost.
So they didn't lose ideals they had. They were just realizing the goals they chased were never truly ideal in the first place.
Exactly. They adopted substitutes. If your whole youth was about, say, just making money instead of pioneering something meaningful, then yeah, achieving that goal in maturity might feel hollow because the goal itself wasn't, well, high enough.
That puts the responsibility right back on us and the choices we made earlier. So what's the big rule for navigating maturity successfully then?
It's incredibly simple, just 3 words. Don't stop growing. He really stresses that physical maturity doesn't automatically mean intellectual or spiritual maturity. The real danger is hitting post-maturity, becoming overripe, that point where you just stop growing.
Overripe. That sounds kind of awful. Intellectually stagnant.
It is. We have to grow on and go on until they are cut down. And he gives that amazing epitaph for the historian Edward Freeman. He died learning.
He died learning. What a powerful image.
Isn't it? Because it means his mind, his spirit, his curiosity, they kept going even as his body aged. That's the goal for maturity, combining the wisdom of age and the heart of youth. Keep learning, keep engaging.
Okay, which brings us naturally to the final stage, part 3, age. And Wise frames this not as just decline, but as opportunity. He uses that Longfellow quote, right? About old age being when the sky fills with stars you couldn't see during the day.
Yes, that potential for a deeper perspective, for serenity, is definitely there. But Wise adds a crucial layer of caution about reverence. Many traditions, including his Jewish heritage, stress respecting the aged, but he questions revering age just for its own sake, separate from the person's merit.
Meaning,
Meaning, age might burn away the superficial stuff, the dross, but the valuable substance, the gold, has to have been put there throughout life already. If you spent your life serving low aims, old age will just reveal a refined version of that lowness. It won't magically transform it.
and he points out something unavoidable about old age too, doesn't he? About facing the big questions.
Absolutely. It forces you to confront life's ultimate issues.
Yeah.
Things many of us, let's be honest, kind of put off, thinking about deeply meaning, purpose, legacy. We delay that evil day of taking thought, as he calls it. And then when we finally get there, we might lack the mental strength, the habit of deep thought, to actually grapple with them. We end up with unpracticed and undisciplined minds just when we need that inner clarity the most.
So the focus shifts. It's not just how to grow old, but how not to grow old in a spiritual sense.
Exactly. He draws a sharp line between seeming not to grow old, the external fixes, cosmetics, maybe chasing fads or cults, and actually not growing old inwardly, which comes from grace, from inner substance. The external stuff, he says pretty bluntly, it doesn't really fool anyone.
So how do you achieve that inner grace, that way of not growing old?
By seeing old age as a time of continued duties, not just earned privileges, the goal shouldn't be to be pitied as weak, but admired as strong, honored as serene.
Achieving that serenity comes down to priorities.
Completely. You have to prioritize the things that actually last, things that survive the passing years. If your main drive in maturity was, say, money making or maybe gambling, hazard of games of chance, as he put it, those things tend to lose their appeal, they pall in old age. But other things, they never get stale.
Like what? What lasts?
Things like the pleasures of the mind, the tasks of the spirit, the possibilities of serving. Those are the investments that pay dividends in serenity later on.
And the biggest obstacle to that serenity, the thing that guarantees an empty old age, is self-centeredness.
Yes. He identifies two specific kinds of selfishness that lead to what he calls a piteously empty end.
Okay, what are they?
Well, the first one is the obvious kind. Crude selfishness, living only for personal fame, power, profit, the selfissimus, he calls it, just total self-absorption.
Right, the classic egomaniac. What's the second type?
This one's more subtle and maybe more common. It's magnifying yourself only through your immediate family, extending your world just enough to include one's own, your kids, your grandkids, your clan, but basically shutting out the wider community, the world's needs.
Wait, why is focusing intensely on family seen as a tragic kind of selfishness? That seems counterintuitive to many people.
Because Wise argues that, ultimately, one's own cannot and ought not to fill one's life forever. If your entire sense of purpose and identity is wrapped up only in your family's achievements or well-being, what happens when children grow up and leave, or when loved ones are inevitably lost? Your world shrinks dramatically, leaving the soul feeling empty, unprepared, without a larger purpose. Your life needs roots beyond just your household.
Ah, I see. It's about having connections and purposes that transcend that immediate circle. So the antidote is to stay engaged.
Fiercely engaged. He points to examples: the great doctor, the dedicated educator, the tireless social worker, people still deeply committed to selfless causes well into their 80s and beyond. Why? Because their purpose wasn't self, it was service.
And that service is rooted in fundamental values.
Absolutely. He mentions Theodore Parker's real trinity: truth, duty, love. Living by those keeps the heart young, even as wisdom grows with age.
Which circles back perfectly to his final unifying conclusion for the whole thing, covering all three stages.
Yes. The only way to grow old well, and paradoxically, the only way not to grow old in spirit, is to know, to love, to serve.
It's such a timeless message, isn't it? Life is this moral progression where the value of each stage really depends on holding on to that high standard.
Yeah.
That the way you live, the way you pursue your goals, is the real goal.
Couldn't have said it better. It all comes down to that inner preparedness, that commitment to something beyond just yourself.
And Wise leaves us with that idea. If life isn't centered on self but lived in the life of others, then you essentially divide your years with another. You share your lifespan. So the final thought for you, listening, is this. Who are you sharing your years with right now? What kind of legacy of service are you building today that will allow you, hopefully, like Freeman, to die learning?